Hi, Rod Kane with the Washington Grand Company here. Once again, I want to talk to you about my favorite ancient medieval game, Triumph. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than the previous videos because we're specifically going to talk about two historical armies and how they interact in the game of Triumph. I've chosen Romans, since it's such a classic army, and so many people collect Romans, love Roman history, and play Roman miniature war games, versus later Macedonians. Another reason for making this video is I want to show the interaction of the heavy and elite foot versus a pike based army, and kind of talk a little bit about how I feel the balance between the heavy elite foot and the pike armies is worked out in Triumph, and how I really think that this time period, this game performs exceptionally well, gives a great, interesting battle, historically reasonably accurate battle that's a lot of fun to recreate on the table. So I'm hoping you'll stay with me and we'll talk a little bit about it. We're not going to play through a whole game, but we're going to just show the interaction between the two different forces and how certain things can develop on the battlefield with these two armies. So I hope you'll stay with me and enjoy the video. Thanks for watching. So first of all, let me introduce the battlefield and the two armies. So we have our battlefield set up. We used a terrain card to kind of put out a typical deployment with a medium number of terrain pieces, since neither one of these armies are really looking for a lot of difficult terrain or rough terrain on the table. We have Polybian Romans versus later Macedonians. These are armies that I set up out of Meshwash. Pretty standard armies. There's different options available, but let me go through the picks that I made for today's armies. We have raiders on the end of the line. Your standard double ranked block of pike, and I've got 8 pike. Remember, pike are 3-point units, so the raiders are 4. The pike are 3, so you can get a few more pike for your dollar. Raiders are securing the other flank. I like the raiders on the end of my pike block because they've got good hit and a lot of speed. A little bit of Lightfoot and Skirmisher because they're on the edge. It's going to probably have some contested woods. And then I put the Knight General on this side behind the Raiders. I normally like to have him closer to the center of the line, but I put him behind the Raiders because he's a Knight General and he could pass through the open order if the opportunity came up. And I didn't want him too far away from the troops that might be going into the woods because I would lose command control. He doesn't really want to go in the woods, but I don't really want to lose command control if I do send troops in the woods. So that's just a typical deployment for that particular army. Camp is in the rear, of course. For the Polybian Romans. So from the Roman line, looking behind the lines here, I have elite foot, which I am using my red painted Roman figures to represent. And then I have some white painted Romans, and those are going to be my heavy foot. That's how I can tell the difference from the heavy foot and the elite foot. I have a Jav Cav General. I have some light foot Velites on this flank and on the other flank, and then a little bit of rabble once again in case the woods become contested. So we're going to take these two very typical forces, contemporary forces, enemies within Meshwash, and we're just going to run through some scenarios on the battlefield, push the lines together, and kind of show you how a battle between pike and heavy and elite foot might play out on the battlefield. So I want to zoom in on this portion of the battlefield. So right now I've taken the Roman forces and I've double marched, moved them on their first turn, and they moved up closer to the battlefield. That left the Macedonians really with only taking a normal move of 3 MU, but their skirmisher ran up into the woods. And I want to kind of demonstrate one of the things I really like about Triumph and the way the zone of controls work relative to heavy infantry lines as well as pike lines. So let's say you have this skirmisher in the woods and he's trying to guard the flank, and pretend like we don't have any flankers here to really stop him or oppose him at this time. And let's say my Roman heavy line was a little bit closer, like this. So one of the things about this in this game is when you have a zone of control being projected by a skirmisher, it doesn't stop this line from moving forward. So this line can continue to move forward, but what it does do is it restricts their movement. So remember we talked in zone of control, they would be restricted to 2 MU, if they're not using their movement to close with the skirmisher, and they're not using their movement to escape from the skirmisher, but they're basically ignoring the skirmisher, they can move 2 MU straight forward. So this line would be able to continue to move. Just peeking at them out of the woods would not be enough for the skirmisher to stop the heavy foot or elite foot from continuing forward. Same thing applies for the pike blocks. So let's reverse the situation and assume that the Romans had gotten to the woods first and put some skirmishers in here, and we had a pike block that wanted to march past these woods. Once again, the skirmisher peeking out of the woods, projecting zone of control, slows the movement of the pike block to 2 MU, but it can still continue forward towards what would be considered the greater threat, the Roman line. It doesn't have to stop. It doesn't have to reverse course. And it doesn't have to go into combat with the skirmisher in the woods, which it probably would choose not to. Now, if the skirmisher wants to actually interrupt or disrupt the pike block, it has a couple of options. One of the options would be that it actually has to come out of the woods and attack. It could attack the front and rear unit like this, or it could attack just the rear unit. However, once again, when it comes out and attacks, it has to fight and win the combat in order to disrupt this, because the pike don't turn. They're still going forward. Skirmisher hit him in the flank. If the skirmisher wins the combat, the pike might have to turn and fall back. If the skirmisher ties, which is very rare, but it could happen, they would just sit there, and then they'd have to fight again in the next turn. And at that time, the pike commander could use a pip to turn and try and push the skirmisher back in the woods. But most likely what happens is the skirmisher could be repulsed. So best case, in a tie, it might hold them up another turn. But just touching the pike block, that just means you have to fight a combat. It's not going to dismantle the pike block. So the pike block is still relatively able to ignore that skirmisher and continue forward. Now, I don't like my pike blocks being interfered with by skirmishers or other people on their flanks, and that's why in most historical battles you'd see something like this, where there's a raider or some other light troop, even the Thracian light foot, something protecting this flank. So now when the pike block marches forward, it can peel them off to deal with that threat if it needs to. So I just want to show how that interaction of that zone of control and that combat interacts with both the pike blocks and the elite or heavy foot. These heavy formed troops don't really have to pay attention to this threat from the woods, other than the slowing of the movement. That represents the fact that, yeah, they're aware there's troops in the woods, it could be a problem. If they were archers, they could be shooting at them, and then they actually cause some damage, maybe even kill somebody. The light skirmishers slows them down. If they attack, could interfere with them, could cause some problems, but short of an attack, they're not really going to stop this formation from going forward. So that's how the zone of control works, and how these skirmishers in the woods could possibly harass or molest those blocks. Notice once again, I have my skirmishers out in front of these lines because I like to use the skirmishers to break up the enemy formation. So my idea is going to be, as these get closer, the Romans will launch these skirmishers at the pike block and try to yank a couple out of line, and then hopefully take advantage of that by moving in and advancing on the pike block if they can. Okay, so our Roman line has moved up. They're within striking distance now of the Macedonian pike. Before we get into the actual fighting here, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between these two styles of armies and the different units. So, as I mentioned before, this stand of pike is 3 points. A stand of elite foot is 4 points. A stand of heavy foot is 3 points. So let's talk a little bit about the pluses and minuses to the two different armies. The pike in 2 ranks has the same forward punching power against the heavy foot, a +3, +2 for rear support. That gives them a +5. +5 for the elite, only +4 for the heavy, which is also a 3-point stand. So the pike is evenly matched in a pure frontal assault with the elite foot. The pike has a slight advantage in that the pike, when separated, it gets a +4 versus mounted. The elite foot are only going to be a +3 because the pike have a little bit of advantage and it's mounted. And against certain mounted, it has this advantage of double ranking and getting a plus for the rear support, and once again having a better advantage against certain types of mounted troops. So against mounted, they're a little bit better than the elite foot, but you have 6 points here trying to generate the same amount of punch for a frontal infantry battle as you have 4 points here. And the other disadvantage for the pike is they are less maneuverable. This stand will allow it, because it's a single element, it has the ability to move obliquely and move around and put that +5 versus infantry for one command point wherever it needs it. So when it comes to plugging holes in the line, these elite foot can move up into this position a lot easier than the pike block, because for the pike block, if they are over to the side like this, to get these two stands into this hole, you're going to need 2 command points because you're moving sideways or obliquely to get to that location. So that kind of gives you an idea of why, historically, this type of formation replaced the pike block because of the Roman maniple and the more maneuverable formation. You could get your troops into line, you could plug holes in the line, and they found that it was a much more effective way to fight. And eventually it did replace the deep phalanx and pike in many of the ancient world armies. The Roman elite foot and heavy foot are not superhuman soldiers in any way. So one of the things I like about Triumph is it doesn't represent the individual legionnaire units as being something beyond what other units of fighting the same style would be. Roman armies were very successful, but they also had many defeats as well. But the Rome's strength was in its ability to shake off those defeats, and their societal strength allowed them to raise new legions when they lost legions. So as an individual army, this Roman army isn't going to fight any better than another army that's equally equipped and similarly trained. And this pike battle is a pretty close slog between these two armies. But you will see there are some advantages to the elite foot, which is natural. But as you can see here too, there are a lot more pike facing off against them. So we're going to put some dice on the table, and we're going to run through a couple rounds and show how this is going to play out a little bit. And then once again, we're throwing the randomness of the dice into it. I would encourage you to try this at home and see how this matchup works for you as well. Okay, so start off, we got our skirmishers out in front, and the Romans' turn, we're going to assume that they got at least 2 pips for command, and we're going to launch 2 skirmishers at the pike blocks. So why did we do that? We talked about this before with the skirmisher special ability. What we're hoping for is a loss, so the skirmishers will evade, and the pikes will charge forward, and that'll create a really juicy target for the Roman line on the next turn if the pike block cannot be reassembled. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use some red dice to indicate the attack values for adding and subtracting due to overlap. So what we're going to do is show the skirmishers normally a +2 versus foot. They have 0 in this case because they're double overlapped. So the skirmisher is going to be a 0. The pike is going to be +3, +2 for rear support normally, but they only get +3 because these are skirmishers. They don't get that rear support against missile-armed troops like skirmishers. Then we'll roll a blue die and a red die. Blue for the Macedonians, red for the Romans. And you see we have a 6 + 0, 6 + 3. So in this particular case, we didn't double the skirmishers. The skirmishers will back up. The pike do not come forward because they weren't getting rear support for this combat. Normally pike do charge forward, but only when they're getting that rear support. They don't get rear support against skirmishers, so they stay where they are. So that didn't work to pull them out of line. For the next die roll, once again we have 0 for the skirmishers and a factor of 3 for the pike. And we'll roll. And this time the Macedonians did not do so well. They got a 4, and the skirmishers got a 4, and they tied. So much for the plan to scare them or disrupt their line using skirmishers. It did not work. So now the Macedonians' turn would come. For the Macedonian turn, I think what they're going to do is they're going to move their skirmisher on the end of their line, and they're going to hold. And play out the skirmish battle another round because they really want to get these guys out of the way because they can't charge through them and get to the Romans. They're still screening the Romans. So we once again have our 0 and our 3. We'll roll again. That's a much more normal result for this. Now they've got a 9 to a 3. They've doubled them. They're going to back up, and then the skirmishers will evade. Okay? So they will evade, and they will pass through and end up in front of the heavy foot behind by going back 4 MU, because they can pass through the close order troops. And the front rank of the pike, they didn't get rear support, will charge forward. So what they've done now is they've effectively taken the pike block apart slightly. So now it is the Romans' turn. So what would the Romans want to do? They'd want to charge forward and take advantage of this disassembled pike block. They have some skirmishers in the way, so let's see if the Romans can get 2 pips for command. And they got exactly 2 pips for command. So the Romans are going to pull this skirmisher back. No, yeah, we're going to pull the skirmisher back because he's going to be in the way. He's going to pass back through. And then the Romans are going to actually move their line forward. They won't be able to bring the Lightfoot and the rabble because these guys are, one's in the rough terrain and the other one would enter the rough terrain. But they can bring their entire rest of their line forward for that second command pip. And that's what they're going to do because they might have a chance to pick off one of the pike units in this particular situation. So the Roman line comes forward. It stops when it hits that pike that's out of place. And now, that pike would normally be a 3. He's only going to be a 1 because he doesn't have his rear support and he's double overlap. So his 3 goes down to 1. And our Romans are still a 5. So the skirmisher did a good job. Yanked some troops out of line. We roll our dice. The pike has been more than doubled. Okay, so we have 8 versus 2. This pike will be doubled, but unfortunately our Roman will charge out of line. This is where that battle card hold the line would come in really handy. Both of these armies I think have access to that battle card as well. That would allow them to maintain their formation. So now, Macedonians' turn. What will the Macedonians do? They have 2 pips. So what will they do with 2 pips? Well, they have an interesting opportunity for the Macedonians. In this particular case, I think I would actually pull my pike back out of reach of the elite foot, and I would, believe it or not, bring the general over. So we're going to move the general over. Now he can't go into combat with this unit because, although I'd like to, he's actually in zone of control of this elite foot here, which zone of control does pass through enemy stands if there's no combat involved, but he can slide over 2 MU to cover that hole. So the general's going to slide over 2 MU to cover that hole. We were going to make sure the pike was right behind him just in case we needed him to be there. And there's a reason for this that might become apparent depending on what happens next, but this being a knight general, he shatters these elite foot. So if this elite foot ends up in a double overlap situation, that could be bad for the Romans because he might get destroyed by the knight general. You're also risking your general. It's a risky move, but right now they need to plug that hole. So next command, there's no combat now, so let's do next command roll for the Romans, and the Romans get another 2. Now 2 is exactly what they would need to bring their whole line forward if they wanted to try and continue to push the combat. So let's say they do that just because it's more interesting than not. And that's 1 pip, 1 command pip there, and 1 command pip here. So we're using our command points to come forward on the Macedonian line. And now let's look at what our combat situation looks like. So here we have a 5, which goes down to a 4 because they're overlapped. Here we have a 4, which is going to stay at a 4, except they're overlapped, so it's going to go to a 3. So we have a 3. These are Raiders versus the Elite Foot. I think we'll just go ahead and do that combat. It's unrelated to the rest of the line. And so we have a 3 to a 4. The Raiders lose. they don't lose by much, so they're going to back up. So they're going to end up back here with the Knight General. Actually, sorry, they're going to end up a little bit farther back because they have a 20 millimeter base, and I line these up with the Pike. So the next combat is going to be here, where the Pike would normally be a 5, but they're going to go down to a 4 for the overlap, which is still there where the hole was created. And we're going to have a 5 for our elite foot. So we'll roll that one off. Oh, the Romans are really hot today. So the Romans get a 6 plus 5, that's a 11. And we have a 6 here. But you'll notice that that 11, not enough to kill them. Okay, so what happens when you're throwing 4s and 5s around on the table, and have the heavies or the Pike are close order foot, so they're going to push back the guys behind them. When you're throwing 4s and 5s around, it takes a 6-1 to really get a double and kill. So we still don't have a kill yet. A 4 and a 5 will continue down the line with this. Let's see if the Macedonians have any better luck. Nope. But once again, a 10 to a 6. So we will back up our Pike block. The elite foot do not charge forward. They didn't double. And we're going to continue right on down the line and hope we can keep that advantage going for the Romans, at least from their perspective. This time we tied. So now we have our 8 to an 8. So that's a tie. That stops that rolling advantage for them. So now we're going to get to a 5 versus a 5. And at this point, if I was the Romans, I think I would keep going that way, because I'm hoping to really push these back, because these are light foot. They're a 3. These raiders are going to be a 4. So I'd like to get an advantage to try and cancel out the raiders over the light foot. And they do. There's that 6-1. So we have an 11 to a 6. But because we didn't have the overlap, it's not a kill. So they're going to push him back. So that's why that overlap was so important to get, because that was a chance to kill in this pushing and shoving. This is what shield wall battles work like in Triumph a lot too. It tends to be a scrum until somebody has something really bad happen. But down on the end, the Romans did exactly what they wanted, which is this light foot, which would normally be a 3, and the raider would normally be a 4, but that raider's going to go down to a 3. They even the odds there by getting that overlap. And now they have a 6 to an 8, so they're going to actually push the raider back off of the light foot, which is good. So that was our next round of combat. So as you can see, other than the lucky shot we had down here, where we were able to take advantage of what our skirmishers had accomplished, we have a situation where we're going to be pushing back and forth in a kind of a rugby scrum-like match, where the two lines will push until some things go bad for one side or the other. Now it's kind of important for the Macedonians on what they get for pips. 4 command pips. They have 2. Believe it or not, 2 is exactly what they need. Actually, it's 1 shy of what they would have wanted. But if they bring all these guys forward for 1 command pip, and that includes the Knight General, now he has to make a choice between bringing the raider, which was not quite formed up with the Knight General because of the difference in base depth, or bringing this side of the line. The Knight General is going to start at a plus 3, 1 better for the General. It makes him a 4. It goes back to a 3, so it's 3 to 3, but the Knight General wins. If he beats him by 1, he shatters. I think we're going to take our chances with the other end of the Pike block. So we're going to bring them in. Okay, so where do we want to start in this battle? Well, I think one of our biggest advantages might be this 4 on 3. So let's start down here with the 3. Now that we fix the overlap, we have a 4. And let's roll it out. Let's see what happens. Oh, once again, the Romans roll their way out of potential disaster, and they're going to back up. So the Macedonian backs up 5 to 6. And now they have a small problem. So now we're going to switch our order again, and we're going to go down to the other end, where we have our overlap general, who would be 4 versus the elite foot. He's going to go to a 3. Our Macedonian general will be a 3. Our elite foot versus mounted will be a 3. And the Macedonians just need a good roll. And they got it. Okay, so now the Macedonians, Knight General beats the Elite Foot by more than 1. That's a shatter. But unfortunately, because he is a knight, he will charge forward. Very excited for his victory and telling everybody to follow him, which nobody is. So that will help our next combat. So now the Pikes will have a 5 advantage to the Romans 4 because of the overlap. And they're going to see if they can get lucky and carry that down the line. And they do win. So they get a 6 to 5, or 6 plus 5. So they're going to have an 11 to an 8. That's going to push these guys back. And this time, because they were getting rear support, both ranks of Pike will follow forward. Carrying this down the line. The Romans are going to be a 4 now because they're overlapped on the side by the Pike. Pike are still a 5. And the Pike win again. So the Pike will push them back. Still not getting that double. As you can see, the double is really hard to achieve when you're throwing these big numbers. Our 4 and our 5 move down. And this time, they tie. So we've got a 7 to a 7. So the advantage stopped. Now we're going to be at 5 versus 5. Except we have an overlap. So we're going to drop to a 4. So the advantage is reversed now because of this overlap. Oh, but the Macedonians roll their way out of it. So they have a 10 to a 7, and they actually push these guys back. Remember, they go back 1 base depth. This is where that base depth becomes so important because you can see the lighter, faster troops on the deeper bases and the mounted. The amount that they charge forward and fall back is significantly different. So you can play with incorrect base depth, and if you have figures that are already based on the way you want to try the game, but it is really an important part of the game. So you can either try and remember what the base depth is and measure it, but it will affect deployment and how tight the troops can. But it does affect that push and shove because you noticed it was really important for this Knight General. This Raider fell back farther than where he had positioned himself on the close order foot. So now we have your classic push and shove. Knight General's made a small breakthrough, but the Romans have reserves. There is a Pike in reserve, and this Raider can still come back into play. And rather than play out this entire battle, I just want to show you how this was going to work. And I wanted to demonstrate that they're not completely outmatched. They did get replaced by this style of fighting in history, and then they came back when you think of things like Swiss Pike and later period. Depending on the tactical situation at the time, the Pike are actually pretty good. They are harder to maneuver. Takes a little more thinking of how to use them, but they do have some versatility against mounted. They're only 3 points versus the Elite Foot's 4 points. But I think this makes for a very interesting battle. This time period was filled with battles where you had a lot of different styles of troops coming into play. So I'd encourage you to if you have these two armies available, try out this matchup. The Roman Elite and Heavy Foot versus the Phalanx or Pike style. And I think you'll find it's a very enjoyable battle. Once again, my name is Rod Kane. Thank you for watching, and this game is called Triumph.